diffidence, the temptation of diffidence. You get to the point where, you get to the point where you've tried, just to sum it up, you've tried really hard. You get tired of the dryness, what you perceive to be no success in the spiritual life, because it's easy. Everybody thinks you know what you're talking about. They think you're holy. They think that you have a grip on spiritual things. You can lead them to God, all this other kind of stuff. And then but because that's so important, you abandon the spiritual life. And you basically just drift on your knowledge of the spiritual life. In diffidence, your holiness essentially becomes the amount to which people think you're holy. That's your holiness. It doesn't have anything to do with you actually being holy or striving for holiness anymore, because you've given that up. And you've sacrificed it for the main fact of the good God wants you to do is to make other people holy, because it's not really possible for you. Do you see? That's diffidence. And the more you really take a look at it, it's absolutely everywhere. This is what you see parents and the families doing. They give up on spiritual life because they can't really do it. They don't know how to manage the world, their marriage, their family, their occupation, even their interest with prayer. So what they do is they give up prayer, or prayer only turns to listening to talks on census fidelity. I don't know how many people I've had, I sit down and talk to them, and they just tell me one thing after another that they heard somebody say. And after a while, you just ask them, what do you know? What do you have? And they're not praying, they're listening. So, anyways, it is a temptation, and it's a temptation you have to blow through. And how do you do it? Well, when diffidence comes, and it's going to come, it comes from, not necessarily isn't diffidence, but the temptations when you get to that line of resistance, meaning you don't feel like you can break through anymore. You've tried hard enough for long enough, and you don't feel like it's ever going to come. And you basically throw off the shackles of striving for spiritual perfection, right? But it's not like this deviant thing that you do. It's just kind of this moment that happens where you pass from striving to acceptance that you're not going to arrive. You see, it's a very thin line. You're trying without lots of success, at least that you can see, to just go ahead and accepting the fact you're not going to arrive. When you make that acceptance, there you are. You've just passed the diffidence. You see this with pretty much everybody out in the world. You get to people that are my age, and they've given up on trying holy stuff. So you get there and you talk to them, and they're like, it's almost like you just smacked them in the face, and they're like, oh yeah, I'm supposed to be praying? Yeah, you've been supposed to have been praying for a long time now. You should probably already have advanced a little bit, but they gave up. They gave up a long time ago. And they immersed themselves in their job. They immersed themselves in their, I wouldn't really say they immersed themselves in their marriage, because that's one of the problems, is they don't really pay any attention to their wives and things like that. So I don't know how much they immersed themselves in their wives, but they did immerse themselves in the world, right? So they have the vacations, their interests, their YouTube channels, their news, their hobbies, their motorcycles, their cars, their chainsaws, whatever the thing that they're into, that's what they're into. And they start to realize they're not so much into the faith. But they're good parents. They go to Mass on Sunday. They get an hour of Mass in. They get 5 hours of coffee hour in. They get to talk about all the news that shows that they're really holy. And that's what fills the void there. That Catholic Gnosticism now of knowing the problems in the church, which substitutes the faith. Do you see? That's kind of what... So you see that the diffidence isn't just... He's talking about it for religious, because that's what we're reading. But the diffidence it is very, very prevalent. This isn't something that's lightly out there. And I'll tell you, every time somebody calls me to talk about spiritual things, I realize that they're pretty much there. The problem is they're fighting with spiritual diffidence. But at least they're asking questions, because if they're asking questions, they haven't fully given up. But they're able to present themselves. When I say for them, what I mean is they're able to paint a picture of themselves to the world that shows them as a good Catholic. But then if you get past the picture and you look on the other side, you see that you have somebody there who's not trying anymore. Spiritual diffidence. Does that make sense? So, but if we are actually trying to go to heaven and we love God and want to keep loving God, regardless of how God, the way we think God treats us, and that's what leads to the diffidence. He doesn't pay attention to me. He doesn't talk to me. He doesn't answer my prayers. He doesn't. And again, that's probably happening because you're at the center of your spiritual life and not God. But again, if we can put God in the center of our spiritual life, then you get that constant conversation with God through the day, whether good things are happening or bad things are happening. Do you see? But whether it's good or it's bad, you're very pleased with it because you know it's from God. So if you can live your life that way, keeping God at the very center and you just kind of serving Him constantly around that center, I don't think you're going to fall into the spiritual diffidence because your whole life's revolving around God. Do you see? Whether you're in dryness or you're in consolation, it doesn't matter to you. Because in the end, all these things depend on God. Do you see? Because we have the major goal, and we should be constantly heading for that goal. The development of all the virtues, living a life of recollection, learning how to pray while we're at work, fighting off the distractions, right? As we're doing all these things, we're opening up our heart. And the essence of it comes down to this: is contemplation's possible when your heart's no longer full of you. Does that make sense? So all these other things that you're doing are supposed to be turning your heart over to God. And the more you do that, the more you make room for Him, and then you're able to arrive at contemplation because He prays in you. That means He fills your heart because there isn't all this other stuff there anymore.